This sad little fellow is a Panasonic PV-1530 VCR made December 5th, 1984. I'm going to show you the back first because you're probably thinking, well, this looks fairly normal. It's got stereo audio ins and outs and video in and out. Well, this is a very unusual beast because it's from the in-between period after the first generation of VCRs, which were mono with linear audio recorded on the edge of the tape. And then the next generation was stereo, but it's what's known as hi-fi stereo. If you're watching this, you probably know what that means, but just as a recap, it's audio that's recorded alongside the video signal on the tape across the whole width. The earlier tapes that had linear audio, they've got 40, 45 dB signal to noise ratio. That's where this one tops out, and it's got Dolby noise reduction actually to help with bring the noise down and get rid of the hiss. Hi-fi stereo, however, has about twice that. It sounds as good as FM radio, maybe even better. So this is from a brief period in between where they were trying to entice people with stereo and Dolby, but not quite hi-fi yet. For that, you had to pay, I think, $200 more for the PV-1730. And that one also had audio meters, peak level meters, which this does not have. By the way, this photo of the 1730 comes from the Northeast Ohio Video Hunter. He has a great website with all sorts of great stuff. You should check it out. And he's got a very lengthy write-up about the 1730 and how excellent it is. But as you can see, this unit is quite beat up. In front of the display where it was probably blinking 12 o'clock, so they must have put duct tape, so there's some residue from that still. They were sick of looking at that. And just physically, it's all beat up. And here is the bottom. Not good. This was clearly in some sort of damp environment and just rusted, frankly. So I popped off the bottom plate, and lo and behold, the rust did not really get inside, as you can see, or the moisture didn't. So there's not too much rust in here. And in fact, the belts were in pretty good shape. I mean, if I was going to fix this up, I would definitely replace them. But they had not turned to black goo. They were relatively supple, so I was surprised. But I did notice there was some rust here on the top right of your screen on that bracket, and then there's some on the circuit board, and that's probably the reason that this unit does not really work. It's also filthy. I mean, this is the top plate. This is what it looks like after I cleaned it a great deal. So whoever had this was not kind to it. You can see this is from the top with the top plate removed. Again, in decent shape, but quite dirty. So that's unfortunate. First thing I was going to do after I got it a little bit clean like this, I wasn't sure if it would operate or not, so I said, well, let me clean the tape head. But as you can see, the tape head does not rotate anymore. It is frozen in place. I've never come across anything like this. I'm not sure if maybe it'll start to move once a tape is put in, but I don't think that that is salvageable. And I just figured I'd show you a little bit more close-ups in here of how dirty it is and how, neglected this was. Must have been sitting for quite some time in a pretty dirty environment. When I did plug the unit in, listen for this chirping sound it makes. So clearly it's getting power, and as you saw in the earlier photos, the front display is working. However, no matter what buttons you push, the front display doesn't actually do anything. And that's unfortunate. That tells me there's probably lots more issues than just that tape head that won't move and the rust on the bottom and the filth that's all over this thing. So the display is weak in and of itself. I figured I would show you the inside here. This is the fine tuning for the channels. Down here, some buttons for programming the clock and the various features, the tape speed, things like that. And then around the side here, oddly, they have this soft or sharp picture controller, which I don't know why you wouldn't want your picture to be sharp, and then for which audio channel you want. And I wonder how many people set these things one way or the other. They came from the factory and they didn't realize, they didn't know that they were there, and they left them and maybe never got the full experience with these machines that they should. I should also point out that these controls, along with most of the others we've seen, are on the 1730 as well, and so are mic inputs. And if we go back and look at the close-up of the 1530 circuit board, you can see here that they have a notation for mic inputs, which the 1530 doesn't have. So there's got to be a lot of parts in common between this machine and the 1730, which I did own one for a couple of years, about 15 years ago, and it was very similar in size and shape and weight to this, and that's expected given that they came out so close together. I should also point out we had a PV-1320 for, I don't know, 20 years. That was our first family VCR. And that was literally 1 year before this 1530 is when we bought it. It was twice as tall. So comparing those just in 1 year, they packed in so many more features to the 1530 in a lot smaller size. That's pretty impressive. On the back, here's some of the other inputs, the typical 75 ohm and 300 ohm antenna connections, channel 3 and 4, depending on what you want to watch this on. And then there's that auxiliary port. Now, that is not for the external cameras. That port looks different. That Panasonic used to offer also RCA. A lot of companies back then had this universal port that kind of looked like this for cameras. But this auxiliary one, I believe, is for an editing controller. I can't say that for sure because it's difficult to find the manuals for these online anymore. But that appears to be what it's for. But that's a look at the Panasonic PV-1530. Not really something that is going to be resurrected by me. And given that it's not hi-fi, I don't even know that I would be interested in resurrecting this. So this is going to probably go to a friend of mine who has a nice 1730. And there's a decent number of parts here. Maybe he can make use of those someday.